The next voice you hear is that of Chris Murphy. He's a senator serving the 5th District in the great state of Connecticut. Earlier this week, there were hearings held. The subject matter and invited guest of that hearing is Kristi Noem, Homeland Security Chief. You can just simply imagine Barbie doll Noem sitting stone-faced as Senator Murphy proceeded, very calmly and very deliberately, to read Barbie the Riot Act.
I say this with seriousness and respect, but your department is out of control. You are spending like you don't have a budget. You're on the verge of running out of money for the fiscal year. You are illegally refusing to spend funds that have been authorized by this Congress and appropriated by this committee. You are ignoring the immigration laws of this nation, implementing a brand new immigration system that you have invented that has little relation to the statutes that you are required, that you are commanded to follow, as spelled out in your oath of office. You are routinely violating the rights of immigrants who may not be citizens, but whether you like it or not, they have constitutional and statutory rights when they reside in the United States. Your agency acts as if laws don't matter, as if the election gave you some mandate to violate the Constitution and the laws passed by this Congress. It did not give you that mandate. You act as if your disagreement with the law, or even the public's disagreement with the law, is relevant and gives you the ability to create your own law. It does not give you that ability. Let's start with your spending. You are on track to trigger the Anti-Deficiency Act. That means you are going to spend more money than you have been allocated by Congress. This is a rare occurrence, and it is wildly illegal. Your agency will be broke by July, over 2 months before the end of the fiscal year. You may not think that Congress has provided enough money to ICE, but the Constitution and the federal law does not allow you to spend more money than you have been given or to invent money. And this obsession with spending at the border, as the chairwoman mentioned, has left the country unprotected elsewhere. The security threats to the United States are higher, not lower, than when before Trump came to office. To fund the border, you have illegally gutted spending for cybersecurity. As we speak, Russian and Chinese hackers are having a field day attacking our nation. You've withdrawn funds for disaster prevention. Storms are going to kill more people in this country because of your illegal withholding of these funds. Your myopia about the border, fueled by President Trump's prejudice against people who speak a different language, has shattered many of this country's most important defenses. Now let's talk about the impoundments. When Congress appropriates funds for a specific purpose, the administration has no discretion as to whether to spend or not spend that money unless you go through a very specific process with this committee. Let me give you 2 of many instances of this illegal impoundment. The first is the Shelter and Services Program. Senator Britt may want to zero that account out, but that account is funded, and it was funded in a bipartisan way. You don't like the program. Your policy is to treat migrants badly. I think that's abhorrent, but it doesn't matter that you don't like the program. You cannot cancel spending in this program, and you cannot use the funds as you have to fund other things like ICE. You have also canceled citizenship and integration grants, which help lawful permanent residents become citizens, helping them take the citizenship test. I know your goal is to try to make life as hard as possible for immigrants, but that goal is not broadly shared by the American public. That's why Congress, in a bipartisan way, for decades, has funded this program to help immigrants in this country become citizens. Now let's talk about why encounters at the southern border are down so much. This is clearly going to be your primary talking point today. You will tell us that it represents a success. But the primary reason why encounters are down is because you are brazenly violating the law every hour of every day. You are refusing to allow people showing up at the southern border to apply for asylum. I acknowledge that you don't believe that people should be able to apply for asylum, but you don't get to choose that. The White House doesn't get to choose that. The law requires you to process people who are showing up at the border and who claim asylum. Why? Because our asylum law is a bipartisan commitment, an effort to correct for our nation's unconscionable decision to deny entry to Jews to this country who were being hunted and killed by the Nazis. Our nation, Republicans and Democrats, decided, wrote it into law, that we would not repeat that horror ever again, and thus we would allow for people who were fleeing terror and torture to come here, arrive at the border, and make a case for asylum. Finally, let's talk about these disappearances. In an autocratic society, people who the regime does not like or people who are protesting the regime, they are just often picked up off the street, spirited away, sometimes to open-ended detention, sometimes they're never seen again. What you are doing, both the individuals who have legal rights to stay here, like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, or students who are just protesting Trump's policies, is immoral. And to follow the theme, it is illegal. You have no right to deport a student visa holder with no due process simply because they have spoken in a way that offends the president. You can't remove migrants who a court has given humanitarian protection from removal. Now, reports suggest that you are planning to remove immigrants with no due process and send them to prisons in Libya. Libya is in the middle of a civil war. It is subject to a level 4 travel advisory, meaning we tell American citizens never to travel to Libya. We don't have an embassy there because it is not safe for our diplomats. Sending migrants with pending asylum claims into a war zone just because it's cruel is so deeply disturbing. Listen, I understand that my Republican colleagues on this committee don't view the policy the way that I do. My Republican colleagues don't share my level of concern for the way that this administration treats immigrants. That's fine. But what I don't understand is why we don't have consensus in the Senate and on this committee on the decision by this administration to impound the spending that we have decided together to allocate in defense of this nation. We as an appropriations committee, we work interminable hours to write and pass a budget. This budget is really hard to write and pass. And so we make ourselves irrelevant when we allow the administration to ignore what we have decided. And then when we look the other way, when the administration rounds up immigrants who are here illegally and have committed no offenses worthy of detainment, we also do potential irreversible damage to the Constitution. These should not be partisan concerns, destroying the power of Congress, eroding individuals' constitutional rights. This should matter to both parties.
Senator Chris Murphy, y'all. Now we who are, shall we say, less than thrilled by the performance of the current occupier of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C., have been trying to find a way to eliminate this problem. Now the problem with that is that by just getting rid of the head, it grows a new one. That new head would be J.D. Vance. The only difference between Vance and the current 47th president is that Vance, apparently, has at least 2 brain cells to knock around in his noggin. He is just as evil, just as prejudiced, just as horrific as the person who would be his predecessor. And if you take a look at the secession line that is current, you will also note that evil has a very, very, very deep bench. A deeper bench than the San Diego Padres have right about now. There are a lot of people who've been mentioning that I word. And that word's going to come into play in a little bit, but for right now, let's be realistic. To get that indictment to be sent to the Senate for a trial and a conviction, we don't have the numbers. We need at least 24 more Democrats in the Senate for a conviction. We will not have that at least until after the midterms, and maybe not after then. So that is your first assignment. But what do we do before that? A building is just as strong as its foundation. Lop off the top, and it's very possible a new head will just grow on that hydra. But the foundation of that building, that foundation, those are those underlings, people who not only carry out the emperor's wishes, but those who may have even more demented ideas of their own. In that case, specifically, we're talking about Barbie doll Gnome. and her main hench person, Thomas Douglas Holman, a.k.a. Odd Job. You remember Odd Job. He was Goldfinger's head of assassins in that James Bond movie of 1964. And like Odd Job, on top of a lack of hair on top of his head, Holman seems to take great pleasure, you might even say sadistically, at his work, mostly consisting of grabbing people off the streets of America, loading them onto planes, and imprisoning them in far-off places almost never to be seen again. In other words, Hermann Göring on steroids. Now, for what I am proposing, it would be nice if we could do it to everyone in the 47/JD administration, or lack of that. But as bad as they have all been, insipidness is not necessarily illegal. It should be, but it isn't. However, as Senator Murphy pointed out just a few minutes ago, the actions of Barbie Doll and Odd Job are not borderline legal. They are illegal AF. And this is where that I word comes into play. My demand is that impeachment hearings begin as soon as possible. For Kristi Noem, under the Constitution, Noem can be impeached. The indictment would reach the Senate, and if she is hopefully found guilty, she would be ousted from her position as Homeland Security Secretary. But what about Odd Job, you ask? What about Holman? Technically, impeaching someone like Holman would be an iffy proposition. Immigration and Customs is not a cabinet-level position. So impeachment could be iffy. But if enough grief is placed on those stooped shoulders, that could be the thing that could force him out on his own. And once out, we could tell the chief executive that any attempts to put someone similar to those two that I've mentioned would result in the same results. Just packing on the legal grief that someone could be neutered in their job, quite frankly, is a page right out of your own playbook, Mr. President. What I'm trying to say here is that your responsibility, dear listener, is to contact your congressman or congresswoman, depending, no matter what party that person might be in, and demand that impeachment proceedings begin as soon as possible against Noem and Holman. You can slip in that you'll remember their actions, or lack of actions, come November 2026. I'm sure that there are enough Republicans out there that still have not been co-opted by the Seven Mountains cult to understand that part. But if we can't get rid of 47, at least we can get rid of this pair. And the effort has to start now. A quick reminder before we go that you can listen to our efforts at trying to put together a podcast wherever you can find a podcast. Just search RadioDon Podcast. That's RadioDon on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and YouTube Music. At RadioDon, the number 1, the iHeartRadio app, and the Pocket Cast app. We also have a Substack, radiodon.substack.com, and we're on so many social media outlets, it's not even funny. Just follow us everywhere at linktree/RadioDon. That's linktr.ee/RadioDon. Do not forget the dot. We're also not sponsored, so if you can throw in a little something in the kitty when you're in the Linktree, it would be greatly appreciated. If you can't do that, at least follow us, repost us, and comment wherever we are. Even if you don't agree with me, just be respectful. That's all I ask. That's it for right now. I'm done. We'll be thinking about you. Talk to you later.